Hello. Today I would like to introduce the book Geopolitical Alpha by Marco Papik. The book can be summed up as a suggestion for investors to use the constraint framework. Investors tend to put too much emphasis and focus on what politicians want, what people in power need, or what kind of goals they want to achieve. This is easy to decipher because that's all they say on TV, in their speeches, and in their writings. However, what we should really put our focus on, according to the book, is what kind of constraints these politicians face. It is very clear that the people in power can change their words at any time. Politicians change their promises, and dictators always go back on their predetermined agendas. Plans always change. However, what doesn't change is the constraints, the limits, physical and financial limits that all these countries and governments face. Therefore, in order to forecast the future with reliable accuracy, we must, instead of focusing on what the politicians want, instead focus on what these politicians can't do. Therefore, these politicians, faced with these constraints, will go down the path of least resistance. For example, in 2017, the Trump administration failed to repeal Obamacare. Even though at the time the Republican Party held the presidency, the Senate, as well as the House of Representatives, they failed for the umpteenth time to repeal the Obamacare Act. This is because the senators, the politically neutral senators, voted not in favor of the repeals. These included Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and John McCain. The senators, no matter even if they're part of the Republican Party, were the determining factor, the determining constraint in deciding the fate of the repealing act. Investors and businessmen no longer can ignore the effects geopolitics has on investing. Today, globalism is dying while we move further and further into a multipolar world, a world in which not a unitary solitary power rules everything, but where different blocks are scattered throughout the globe. Therefore, we can no longer reliably say that free trade and laissez-faire economics will persist as a guaranteed assumption in the paradigms to come. Thus, we must find answers in this very uncertain world, and the way to do so is to use the constraint framework. This, in order to create your own great constraint framework, this book introduces many methods and tips and tricks. One of these include the median voter thesis. In a democratic country, the next reigning power is decided by voting. Therefore, we must look at the average voter, the average median voter, and what they are and what they want. This will serve as the constraint for all these politicians and government officials. For example, in 2016, most of the major news networks predicted that Trump would not win and that the chances of Trump winning were very slim. Huffington Post even went so far as to say that Trump winning had a success rate of about 2%. These analysts and experts were wrong because they put too much focus on the fact that Trump didn't have enough political experience, all the media news networks and celebrities were against him. These are all auxiliary, not the main focus, according to Marco Papik. Instead, the deciding factor was the fact that the median voter simply empathized more with Trump's America First policy rather than the globalist policy that had reigned for the decade prior. Having seen this, Marco Papic actually, at the time, analyzed and let out a research paper putting the chances of Trump winning at 46%. We, in order to gain insight about the future, look up macro news constantly and very continuously. However, through my experience, it seems that simply amalgamating all this kind of information sources doesn't result in meaningful analysis. However, simply because we believe that we must know how the world works, or that we must know what the news is like at any given time, I, for one, continuously, like a robot, look up all these financial journals and news outlets, hoping to gain some insight among all the noise. However, through reading this book, it was made clear to me that what is vitally necessary isn't just the quality or the amount of information received, but the framework in which we receive and process this information. I found that I myself put too much emphasis on what these politicians were saying, what they wanted, what their goals were, rather than what kind of constraints they faced, what they couldn't do. A constrained framework works not only for investing, but for any area or field that needs these kinds of forecasting abilities. And for anyone who wants to create their own framework or improve their forecasting knowledge, I highly recommend this book. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful day.